The battlefield was already silent, but inside the surgeon's tent, silence turned to terror. Torches flickered against canvas walls, shadows dancing like restless spirits. A soldier lay half alive, his body mangled by steel and fire, breath rattling like a broken drum. Around him, hardened legionaries looked away, unable to face the horror. And then came the surgeon. His hands, once steady from years of saving lives, now trembled as he pulled back the blood-soaked cloth. What he uncovered was not just a wound, it was a glimpse into the darkest cost of Rome's endless wars. Rome's legions were feared across the known world, but what history rarely tells is the price paid in flesh and blood. Behind every victory carved into stone, there were men who bled unseen. Men whose survival depended not on generals, but on surgeons hidden in the shadows of the battlefield. These healers were not armed with glory, but with knives, iron, and trembling resolve. Their battlefield tents became theaters of agony, where screams drowned out prayers. And every decision was a gamble between life and death. In this story, we step into one such tent, where a Roman surgeon, battle-hardened yet human, faced a wound so gruesome it silenced even the bravest soldiers. His hands shook, not from inexperience, but from the unbearable weight of what lay before him. This is not the tale of conquest. It is the tale of survival, of courage, and of Rome's hidden war against death itself. Battlefield chaos. The clash had ended, but the field still roared with echoes of suffering. Where hours before the ground had trembled with the march of disciplined legions, now it groaned beneath the weight of broken men. The iron scent of blood hung thick in the air, mingling with the smoke of dying fires and the bitter stench of sweat and fear. Stretcher bearers moved like shadows, weaving between corpses to find the ones still clinging to life. Their tunics were soaked crimson, their arms trembling not from battle, but from the endless carrying of bodies. Some soldiers begged for water, others for death. Cries of "Mother, Mother," rose from men who had never before admitted fear. The surgeon's tent, pitched on a rise above the chaos, became the final refuge. Its entrance was a river of agony, limbs hanging loose, faces twisted in shock, men dragged by comrades too wounded to walk themselves. Inside, benches overflowed, blood dripping to the dirt floor, where flies gathered in black clouds. Everywhere, the sound of iron tools scraping against bone, the hiss of cauterizing flames, the muffled groans of men biting down on leather straps. No one spoke of victory here, for within these canvas walls, there was only survival. And yet, as brutal as it was, the tent stood as Rome's lifeline. For each soldier saved meant one more shield to raise, one more sword to lift. The empire's heartbeat did not echo from its marble halls in Rome. It pulsed here, in the mud and blood, where surgeons fought their own endless war against death. It was here that the surgeon prepared himself, and soon a case would arrive that would shake him to his very core. The Roman surgeon, he was not a general nor a man of rank, yet in this tent his authority was absolute. The surgeon of the legion stood apart from other men, not because of medals or triumphs, but because he bore the weight of every life that passed through his hands. His name has long since been lost to history, but his presence was etched into memory. Gray streaked his hair, though he was not yet old, and lines carved his face deeper than any soldier twice his age. Years of war had stripped him of illusions. He had seen men torn in ways no poet would ever describe. Still, his duty was clear: to fight death itself with nothing but iron and will. Before him lay the tools of his craft: a bronze scalpel sharpened to a cruel edge, iron forceps ready to grasp shards of bone or arrowheads lodged deep within flesh, hooks and needles, sponges soaked in vinegar, and above all, the cauterizing iron, glowing red when pulled from the brazier, its hiss promising both salvation and unbearable pain. Yet for all these instruments, his true weapon was resolve. Still, even resolve could falter, for he remembered every face he had failed to save, each one returning to him in dreams. They whispered in the silence, accusing, reminding him that he was not a god, but merely a man with trembling hands. The Legion trusted him, though they feared his tent. To be carried here was both a blessing and a curse, proof that you lived, but also that you stood at the very edge of the abyss. And tonight, as he washed his hands in a basin already darkened with blood, he felt the familiar weight press down on his chest. His assistants glanced nervously at him, sensing his unease. For outside, shouts rose. Another patient was being brought in. The surgeon steadied himself. What he would face next would demand more than skill. It would demand everything he had left. The arrival of the wounded man. The tent's flap burst open with the force of desperation. Two legionaries stumbled inside, their armor streaked with blood, carrying between them a comrade whose body sagged like dead weight. Their faces were pale, not from their own wounds, but from the horror of the burden they carried. "Make way!" one shouted hoarsely. The benches shifted, assistants scrambled, and the surgeon's heart sank at the sight. The soldier upon the stretcher was young, perhaps no more than 20 summers. His eyes flickered open for a moment, glassy and unfocused, lips murmuring words no one could hear. His chest rose and fell in shallow spasms, each breath a struggle against the shadow of death already hovering. With slow, deliberate motion, the surgeon peeled back the blood-soaked bandage. The cloth clung stubbornly to torn flesh, and when it finally gave way, a fresh wave of blood surged forth. Gasps filled the tent. One assistant staggered back, hand to his mouth, while another crossed himself as though shielding against evil. The wound was not merely deep, it was catastrophic, an injury so savage that even Rome's hardened healers faltered. The man's side was ripped open, organs glimpsed through mangled ribs, a gash so obscene it seemed impossible he still breathed. The surgeon's throat tightened. For a moment, he could only stare. Then he whispered to himself, as much a prayer as a command. The procedure begins. The surgeon's assistants pressed closer, each waiting for his order. The boy's breathing rasped, shallow and fast, his skin turning gray beneath the dim torchlight. Time was slipping away like sand between fingers. "Hold him," the surgeon commanded. Two men pinned the soldier's arms and legs, for he knew that once the iron touched flesh, the human body would thrash like a trapped beast. A strip of leather was shoved between the young man's teeth, his jaw clamping down with a muffled groan. The surgeon reached for the bronze scalpel. Its edge gleamed faintly in the light, as though eager for the task. He made the first incision, cutting away the dead, ragged skin around the wound. The soldier screamed into the leather, his whole body convulsing, and sweat poured from his brow. Blood spurted, soaking the surgeon's hands. He moved quickly, searching through the gore for shattered ribs and fragments lodged deep. An assistant pressed vinegar-soaked sponges to slow the flow, the acrid scent mixing with the iron tang of blood until the tent itself seemed to choke on it. Then came the forceps. With steady pressure, the surgeon extracted shards of bone, each one pulled free with a sickening scrape. He worked without pause, for hesitation meant death. His hands trembled still, but he forced them to obey, each movement driven by years of practice and the sheer refusal to surrender this boy to the grave. At last, he called for the cauterizing iron. From the brazier it came, glowing red like a brand from the underworld. The assistants braced the patient tighter as the surgeon pressed it deep into the gaping wound. A hiss filled the tent, louder than the soldier's muffled shriek, louder than the crackle of torches. The stench of burning flesh rose, acrid and revolting, driving some soldiers outside to retch. But the bleeding slowed. The iron had done its merciless work. Next came the needle. With hands still trembling, but mind sharpened, the surgeon stitched torn flesh together in rough, desperate seams. Each thrust of the bone needle was a battle against time. Each knot tied a plea to the gods of war and healing. When the last stitch was placed, the surgeon leaned back, his chest heaving. The boy still breathed, ragged, shallow, but alive. The tent was silent now, save for the hiss of the brazier and the quiet moans of men awaiting their turn. But inside the surgeon's mind, a storm raged. He had bought this soldier a few more breaths, but had he truly saved him? The weight of silence. When the last stitch was tied, the tent did not erupt with relief. It sank instead into silence, an oppressive, suffocating silence that clung to every man inside. The soldier's shallow breaths rasped like whispers from another world, each one uncertain, each one threatening to be the last. The surgeon stood motionless, scalpel still in his hand, as if afraid to set it down. Around him, assistants shifted uneasily, their eyes darting to the boy and then to the surgeon, as though searching for assurance he could not give. He washed his hands in the basin, now red as a slaughterhouse, and stared at the rippling surface. In its reflection, he did not see victory. He saw the faces of men he had lost, the screams that never faded, the eyes that had gone glassy beneath his trembling fingers. How many had slipped through his hands? How many ghosts pressed against the canvas walls of this tent, demanding answers? His duty was to save, yet more often than not, he prolonged agony. And still, he returned each day, knowing that no god, no emperor, no glory would lessen the burden. The silence deepened, broken only by the boy's weak gasp. The surgeon placed a hand on the soldier's chest, feeling the faint rise and fall. Alive, yes, but for how long? In that stillness, he understood a truth few dared speak. War did not just devour soldiers on the field. It devoured those who tried to save them. The outcome, hours passed, though in the tent time felt like a cruel illusion. The surgeon remained at the boy's side, refusing to surrender him to the night. Outside, the battlefield had grown quiet, torches burning low, the songs of victory drowned by the endless groans of the wounded. The young soldier's chest rose and fell in uneven rhythm. Every gasp felt like the last, yet stubbornly he clung to life. At one point, his hand twitched, weakly clutching the surgeon's wrist, as though anchoring himself to the world. The surgeon froze, then gripped it gently, whispering words he himself barely believed. "Hold fast, son. Hold fast." Around them, soldiers watched in silence. Men who had faced spears without fear now waited like children, their hope resting not on gods or generals, but on the trembling hands of one man. Each passing moment felt like judgment. Finally, as dawn crept pale across the canvas walls, the boy stirred. His eyes flickered open, clouded yet alive. A murmur escaped his lips, broken but clear enough to silence the tent. "Am I still among my brothers?" The surgeon swallowed hard, unable to trust his own voice. He nodded once. A sigh rippled through the tent. Some men crossing themselves, others pressing fists to their hearts. For the first time in hours, the surgeon allowed himself to breathe. But the relief was bitter. He knew this victory was fragile, bought with agony, and that by nightfall, another stretcher would bring him yet another life to weigh against death. Still, for this moment, the boy lived. And that was enough. Reflection on Roman medicine. In the great marble halls of Rome, senators debated laws, generals planned campaigns, and poets sang of conquest. But in the mud of distant battlefields, medicine was forged not in libraries, but in blood and screams. Roman surgeons were craftsmen of necessity. They lacked the knowledge of the body that future ages would uncover, yet their ingenuity was born of desperation. They used bronze scalpels to cut, vinegar to cleanse, wine to dull the senses, and fire itself to seal wounds. There were no anesthetics, no safe wards, only tents filled with groans, and men who prayed that iron might grant them another sunrise. Some lived because of these crude methods, others died despite them. But each attempt carved a step forward in the history of healing. Rome's battlefield surgeons became unwilling pioneers, testing the limits of human endurance, teaching the empire that victory was not measured only in banners raised, but in lives dragged back from thee. And yet, their work carried a cruel paradox. To save one man, they often inflicted torments equal to the wounds of battle itself. Survival was never certain, merely bargained for, moment by moment, stitch by stitch. The surgeon in that tent was no hero in marble, no name inscribed in triumphal archways. He was a shadow in history, one of countless healers whose trembling hands fought wars of their own. His battlefield was flesh, his enemy death, and every scar he stitched was both a victory and a wound upon his soul. History remembers emperors, generals, and battles won beneath fluttering banners, but it seldom remembers the trembling hands in a dimly lit tent, fighting for a single heartbeat more. The Roman surgeon who bent over that dying boy did not seek glory. He sought only to hold back the tide of death for one fragile life. His battlefield was not marked by triumph, but by silence, sweat, and scars that time would never erase. And yet, in that silence lies a truth we cannot ignore. Empires rise and fall on the backs of soldiers, but they endure only through the hands that heal them. Behind every marble victory arch, there were men whose names we will never know. Men who stitched flesh in the dark and bore the weight of survival on their shoulders. Perhaps their courage was the greatest of all.